Hey, everybody, it's Robert Phoenix, your pal, broadcasting to you live from Fredericksburg, Texas. What's going on out there? How is everybody today? It is the 3rd of December, 2018. Just going to chill out a little bit, wait for people to show up and assemble. Who's the first? Who's going to be first in the chat room today? Suspense is overwhelming. It's Judy. It's Judy. Hi, Judy. How are you today? Ninth House Gypsy. Oopsie. Hi, Robbery. It's okay. It's okay. I'm okay with robbery as long as I get to play Robin Hood. I'm all about Robin Hood and robbery in that regard. Hey, there's Lori Adams. Good morning, Lori Adams. How is everybody? What's happening? It's Monday. A little bit gray, a little bit overcast. Of course, it's December. It's supposed to be. The weather is conforming to its organic pattern. Then we get a little chicky chick sign in the chat room. We had a pretty good show last night over on the 11th house. And we talked about Bush. Ani Brito. There's Beth Berry. Good morning. Oh, where's my man? Where's my man? He's got to get on the action. Where's the J-Man? He's going to be coming here soon. There he is. There he is, the co-host of the show. 125 likes over on Facebook. Hey, there's Shari Ives. Shari, you've been killing it on Facebook lately, by the way. I just got to say. Yes, there's Jasper. Shari, if you're on Facebook, you should follow Shari. She's just been absolutely torching the place. It's been great. Great seeing a lot of her posts. Yeah, last night was a good show. We got into Bush. You do more than try. You do more than try. Hey, Justice. Good morning to you. Yeah, Jasper's here lending his psychic perceptions from the Pleiades. He's a Pleiadian channel. That's what he does. When he gets on the show, I can't do this really without his interdimensional transmissions. There's Chris and Steve. Shari does rock. By the way, if you haven't seen or experienced the show on Friday with Chris and Steve, I highly recommend it. It's a really, really good show. It's over on the 11th House radio side of the YouTube channel. Yeah, so last night we got into Bush and his chart. So Sean White brought up an interesting point that I didn't really address, nor did I really want to address on. So there's this, back in 2009, I started to read about how Bush wasn't really Bush. It was part of like the Scherf family. Yeah, I got some Christmas lights. You see how the owl got illuminated in its third eye? You see that? The owl has reached a process of illumination. That's what that represents right there in his third eye. Yeah. So back in 2009, I started to read about how the Bushes were actually this family that was connected to Hitler, and shows young George Scherf, who ultimately becomes George Bush, is like pictures with, I think, Goering and people like Goring, people like that. And I've known about this material for 9 years, and it's interesting. And I also find it interesting that, none of the really like hardline researchers have ever really like picked up on it and run with, like, to me, one of the, I think most important researchers of the 20th century was Jim Marrs. And Jim never touched the material. David Icke never touched the material. I mean, I could go on. Joseph Farrell, whatever, has never touched the material. So there's a lot, and that would be something that Joe Farrell would probably love, because it has the Nazi theme to it. So I'm not unaware of this whole like Bush Scherf connection, but I'm also not completely convinced that it's valid. Could be valid, but it also may not be. So I was just dealing with his chart as we know it. because that's what we got, right? That's what we got. So we looked at his chart last night. Hi, Cato. Looked at his chart last night. We looked at other presidents' charts. And one of the things that we found out is the preponderance of the sign of Leo. Yeah, Leo. Leo the lion, right there. This is the Lion King of Fredericksburg, this guy right here. So Leo, the preponderance of Leo in every chart with the exception of Ronald Reagan. And it was a really interesting kind of light that went off in my brain when I saw all that Leo connection. Where Alpha Draconis in Bush's chart, I don't know. I don't know. I was just looking at Antares and Regulus, because Regulus was, it's the fixed star of kings. And I was looking for trying to find out where the king code was in the various charts. And, sure enough, Regulus is right on his ascendant, just like it's right on Trump's ascendant. Maybe that's why Trump loves George Bush, or at least professes to love George Bush. At least this week he does. So Trump apparently killed it over at the G20. He got a new deal in place with China. The world theoretically bowed to like his tariff game. So it's very interesting. Trump has had various levels of success and failure in business. And, his way of doing business is right in alignment with his chart. It's chaotic. It's making people kind of run for the exits, not knowing, it's like throw a grenade into the room and see what happens. So, and I know he's taking advice, quote unquote, from people like Wilbur Ross and Mnuchin and probably even Kissinger on some level. But whatever he's doing seems to be working in terms of the global trade war, because China has capitulated and basically said that, they're going to lay off on kind of their thing. And so for whatever, however you feel about that sort of thing, it seems like it was kind of a win, right? On some level. But the G20 was like fascinating because, of course, Trump had to pretend that, Putin didn't exist. And there was this one moment where he walks off the stage and he's with this guy from Argentina, Macri. And Macri was like, trying to figure out where Trump was. It's kind of a comical moment. There's a lot of unintentional comedy that follows Trump around. Speaking of Macri, not quite Macri, Macron, he's got a serious problem on his hands. Really serious problem. The French, by and large, are people that are nationalists at heart. And they're nationalists at heart because they're tied to a culture. It goes way, way back, right? The French or the Francs are the descendants, theoretically, of the Merovingians. At least the leadership is. It all starts with Merovec, and then eventually goes into Clovis, who's one of the the big leaders of the Silesian Frank sort of empire. It goes back a really long ways. The French have a very powerful culture, and their culture is tied to their country and their national identity. So now they're getting pissed off. There's a bit of a revolt taking place now in Paris. There was a major event that Macron was at, and the fire brigade turned their back on him during this event. And they have these yellow vests that are popping up. We got white helmets. We got yellow vests. We got pink pussy hats. The world is filling up with very interesting postmodern fashion choices. Anyway, the yellow vests are they're protesting. They're not happy. It started with kind of a strike on the price of diesel. Macron he's a socialist. France has been a socialist country for a long time, and the French have been able to live with it because their cultural and their national identity wasn't too affected by the fact that they had to pay more taxes. And, it wasn't ideal, but at least they weren't fucked with. At least they could still be French. But now that's not really the case, and they're having to deal with a huge influx of migrants, especially in the south of France, where churches are being turned into mosques, and they're not entirely happy. Now, there's been an undercurrent of unrest for quite a while. It started off really when the French went to war in Algeria, and as a result of that, and a lot of displacement, there were Algerians. A lot of Algerians started to move into France, and so there's always been kind of this uncomfortable sort of undercurrent. But what's interesting is that French have never really had an issue with like black Africans. Like France didn't have any slavery, so it's always been this kind of really interesting sort of equal liberated relationship in that regard. But other countries like the Algerians, and now of course the North Africans, and people from Libya and Turkey, wherever this push coming up from Africa and the Middle East, wherever they're sort of originating from, the French are not digging it. And so Macron's got some real issues because finally, the French are kind of waking up. They're waking up over the fact that this is their country and their culture is being snatched from underneath their feet. I've seen videos of Paris, and the streets of Paris are just lined with homeless people, mostly men, living on the streets in conditions that are absolutely deplorable. And most of them are from Africa. So the French are starting to get into this place where, again, they have a cultural identity, a national identity, and they're pissed off. They're finally seeing what's happening. Will it be too late? I don't know. But it's going to be interesting to watch. Certainly. Rhonda says, "Good morning. $8 for a gallon for gas in Paris. Good way to reduce traffic." Yeah. You can get cars like if you buy a Jetta in Germany. Do you know that Jetta will get 75 miles per gallon? It'll get 75 miles per gallon, but you can't get the same Jetta in the United States. About to set in 30 minutes. Good to hear you're so upbeat. Daddy Bush did one good thing, cheered us all up. France is named for a Frank, who was Charlemagne. Yeah, Frank. He's a Frank. Absolutely. It all starts with Merovingian. Merovingian, the king of the Merovingians, who is said to have been born of a woman and a sea bull or a sea beast. So was the king of the Merovingians? Was he part of some kind of race from another world? Like the Dogon, perhaps. Interesting. So that's the origination of the Merovingians. Merovec. He's not the only one. There are other stories of great leaders who were born of sort of alien and human interaction. Let's put it that way. Let's see. So there's some interesting things that have happened. Of course, we're going to get a plate full of Bush this week, what I call Bush shit. We're going to get heaping, steaming piles of Bush shit this week, and it's going to force me to redirect my attention. Absolutely. But some interesting things have happened. I don't know if this has crossed your radar, but an admiral in the US Navy committed suicide. Now, this is weird because this doesn't really happen. Generals, admirals, they have it pretty good. They've got a good life. They've worked hard to get to a certain level. There's lots of perks involved. A lot of perks. And this guy's name is Scott Stearney. He's based out of Bahrain. And he supposedly committed suicide. I'm going to read this here. This is from yesterday. Vice Admiral Scott Stearney, who oversaw the U.S. naval forces in the Middle East. That's a big deal. This guy is the commander of the naval forces in the entire Middle East. I would say that's probably one of the more powerful positions inside of the U.S. military, considering that there are so many moving pieces. in the Middle East. You've got, of course, oil production. That's number one. The relationship to our best friend in that region, of course, the simmering and ongoing feud / conflict with Iran, the ongoing war with Syria. There's a lot. There's a lot going on. It's a big job, and this guy was in charge of it. I'll continue to read. Vice Admiral Scott Stearney, who oversaw U.S. naval forces in the Middle East, was found dead Saturday in his residence in Bahrain, officials said. Defense officials told CBS News they are calling it an apparent suicide. Just like Mike Borda, who had an apparent suicide. He was another high-ranking military official. And because people, they shoot themselves twice in the chest when they commit suicide. That makes a lot of sense. That's why I think one of the most tried and true proven methods of taking oneself out. Stearney was the commander of the U.S. Navy's Bahrain-based Fifth Fleet. Rear Admiral Paul Schließ, the deputy commander of the Fifth Fleet, has assumed command. The Navy said in a statement, "This is devastating news for the Stearney family and for the team at Fifth Fleet and for the entire U.S. Navy." Chief of Naval Operations Admiral John Richardson said Scott Stearney was a decorated naval warrior. He was devoted husband and father, and he was a good friend to all. So why would he kill himself? The Naval Criminal Investigative Service and the Bahraini Ministry of Interior are investigating Stearney's death, the Navy said, but foul play is not suspected. Okay. Stearney, a native of Chicago, joined the Navy in 1982 after graduating from the University of Notre Dame. According to his official biography, he became an aviator in 1984 and flew the FA-18 Hornet and several fighter squadrons and logged more than 4,500 mishap-free hours of flight. Previously, the director of operations for U.S. Central Command, Stearney became commander of the Fifth Fleet in May 2018, relieving Vice Admiral John C. Aquilino. The Fifth Fleet operates in the Arabian Gulf, Red Sea, Gulf of Oman, and the Indian Ocean, including the critical strategic choke points of the Strait of Hormuz and the Suez Canal. This is one of the most important points on the planet. And the guy that was running the operation, the naval operation for the entire area, gone. So what is the reason behind this? Was he upset, depressed? Was he suicidal? Or is there something else happening? Is there something else taking place behind the scenes? Maybe, perhaps, Stearney was aware of plans that were being fomented that would move us into some sort of a conflict, quite possibly with Iran. Maybe he wasn't down with it. Maybe he was opposed to starting a conflict with Iran, perhaps based on a false flag scenario, which would then draw us into kind of an ongoing conflict with Iran. Because, of course, that's what our best pal in the Middle East wants. And whatever our best pal in the Middle East wants, seems like our commander-in-chief, whatever he is, will go along with it, hook, line, and sinker. So did Scott Stearney really commit suicide? Or was he strategically removed for something bigger? It's one of those news events that will come across your screen and then leave your screen, move on. But it's significant. This is a significant man in one of the most powerful and significant positions on the entire planet. And he's gone. And he killed himself. It makes very little sense. Of course, I don't know him. No connection to his personal life. No, I'm just reading this. It just seems odd. Seems very, very odd. And he's got his replacement all ready to go and lined up. That is Rear Admiral Paul Schließ, Deputy Commander of the Fifth Fleet. Interesting. And certainly, if true, his family has Probably a lot of questions about what happened. Okay, let's get into a little of this Macron stuff. Just some background, just to tell you what's going on there and why people are pissed off. So apparently, he is holding an emergency meeting, and that's taking place because the gas prices have gone through the roof, and he's trying to tamp down these escalating protests. People are pissed off, so he's considering a state of emergency. You look at some of these photos in Paris, and man, I mean, there's a lot of vandalism taking place. People are pissed off at this guy. Their cars are burned. Wow. Look at that. Anyway, he's got his hands full. This guy had no political experience really per se. He was an accountant for the Rothschilds. That's how he got his gig. How about that? So there's some, we still have this border crisis. And now the mayor of Tijuana, this mayor of Tijuana is interesting because he's starting to get very active. He shut down the caravan shelter. And now the caravan illegal are sleeping on the streets of Tijuana. So Mexico now has a crisis on its hands. I mean, look, these are humans. I get it. They really shouldn't be. I mean, it feels like they were manipulated. It's like, come on, get on board the Migrant Caravan Express. It's going to be a good time. It's going to be a party, man. And we get to the United States, we're going to party down, and we're going to all get nice places to sleep and free cell phones and credit cards from George Soros, and it's going to be fun. Didn't really turn out that way. I read this story about this young girl who was part of, and this is what, like, I'm going to read you another story here. But for all the people that are so emotionally involved in the kids, they need to hear this unfortunate and ghastly story. That there was a young girl who had to go see a doctor because she'd been raped repeatedly. And I say young, she's like 7 or 8 years old. Young, okay, raped repeatedly. They found, apparently, I'm not sure how they do this, but apparently they found 20 different types of DNA in her. Right? 20 different types of DNA inside, which means that 20 different men had their way with this young girl. But you'll never hear the bleeding hearts talk about this. And if they do, they'll blame it on Trump and the administration. They won't blame it on the animals that were part of the caravan. Because if they do, then they're basically admitting that these are the people that we're allowing into this country. I had an interesting conversation on Saturday night with the young couple of millennials. And they were clearly on the conservative side of things. They were an interesting couple. They'd been dating each other for about 6 months, and the girl was a young woman. She was a pistol, total pistol, and the guy was bright, eccentric. Let's just say his blade wasn't as sharp as hers. Anyway, and so I could hear her at least kind of working this migrant thing or refugee thing or whatever you want to call this thing out. Because part of her is she's a woman. And as a woman, women relate to basically children in life. It's part of the process. It's part of what makes women women. And so therefore there's this sense of protection, even if it's not their own children, right? Protection. And yet she's also working out this other piece, which was, hey, it's a lot of people. Hey, what do they do when they get here? I mean, all the questions that people tend to ask about something like migration, immigration. So it's really interesting to watch her sort of work that out in kind of real time and try to come to some sort of understanding about it, or at least some sort of position. And then I said, basically what they need to do is they need to make where they live better. They need to get a better deal where they live. That's always been the story. And I've said it before. If George Soros, whoever George Soros is, a lot of people think he's no longer alive. And I don't have a problem with that. Maybe it's his son. Who knows? But if they were really committed to real change, they'd make their place a lot better. They'd offer microloans, and they build structures, and they would make sure that MS-13 or whatever local drug gangs are routed and out of there, so people can feel safe and feel like they have a real life. And the kids who are born into those families have social structures involved, so they don't go run into MS-13 and become members of gangs. That's really, it's the basic fundamental way of going about doing business. Take care of it, make their place better. We don't want to leave. We like where we live. But that's not really the case. And so they were sold a bill of goods. And now it's becoming anarchy in the streets of Tijuana. And I'm sure that Trump will get blamed for that because, of course, the Mexican government will shoulder no blame. They're immune. Bullets bounce off their chest. The bullets of criticism bounce off their chest. So that's going on. Well, guess what? There are people who are involved in our government who decided that such a moving situation, profoundly moving, that they're being moved to take some action. Such is the case with Pramila Jayapa. Who is Pramila Jayapa? She is the U.S. House Progressive Leader, and she is joining a so-called caravan of migrants to cross the border with Mexico and the United States. Okay, so this is interesting. She's from Washington State. She's, of course, a Democrat, and she is scheduled to enter from the Mexican border city of Tijuana on Saturday afternoon, so she's already there, as a gesture of opposition to crackdown on immigration by U.S. President Donald Trump. Now, I find this fascinating. So how mediated will her experience be? Will she be a part of the migrant caravan with a bunch of armed goons around her? Is that what's going to take place? Will she be protected at every step of the way? Or will she, because really, to be honest with you, if she was really earnest about her effort, I mean, she's Indian, but with the right sort of affectation, she could probably pass for being Spanish. She should just insert herself into the caravan like Borat and see what happens. See, that would be a real act of participation. Instead of going down there with armed goons, I'm standing with you in solidarity. Right? I'd like to see what happens if she just got turned loose. Would she ever do that? No, she wouldn't do that. You know why? Because she's smart. She wouldn't want to take her life or her body in her hands. All right, so I'm going to continue to read the story. Jayapa, who flew to the border Friday, was gathering information about how U.S. and Mexican authorities are treating asylum seekers. The president is lying about this caravan. He's fear-mongering, Jayapa said in a Friday interview before a trip. He's trying to use people who are seeking asylum and literally running from death just for his own political benefit, and that's a disgrace. Well, why are they running from death? Why? Why are they running from death? Shouldn't that be addressed? I mean, we have no problem inserting ourselves into places like Syria. No problem. No problem into inserting ourselves into places like Yemen. Even though it's the Saudi Arabians that are basically obliterating the Yemeni people, they're using our weapons, our tactical information. No problem with that. Okay. Well, Libya, no problem. We have no problem inserting ourselves in any situation which the United States government, the corporations that are intertwined with the United States government see fit. Also our best friend in the Middle East, however they see fit. But insert ourselves into a place like, say, Honduras, because the crime and MS-13 has a stranglehold on the people that are creating an atmosphere of death. We can't insert ourselves into that area, to that part of the world. Why not? We do it every other fucking place. Sorry. The migrants were sprayed with tear gas while trying to cross U.S.-Mexico border earlier this week, prompting Jayapal, the newly elected House Progressive Caucus co-chair, to make the move. When I read the report about a week ago that kids and moms were being tear gassed, I just couldn't sleep. Jayapal said, I want to go see for myself what is happening. What happens to asylum seekers as they get to the border? How are they turned back? What's happening to them in between where the conditions in which they're living? Why don't you spend time in the state of Washington, which has a really hardcore issue with opioids and methamphetamine? Why don't you insert yourself into the lives of those people? Right? Why don't you just spend time focusing on where you live versus Mexico? Maybe that would be if I was somebody from the state of Washington, I'd be pissed off. I'm sorry. If you've ever been to Seattle, Seattle's got a really, like, at least when I lived there a long time ago, I don't know what it's like now. I'm sure it's not any better. But Seattle had a terrible homeless problem. You see people sleeping on the streets. And really just like transient indigent people. The so-called caravan mostly consists of women and children migrants from Honduras trying to avoid Trump's anti-migrant crackdown. I'm not sure about that. See, this is from Press TV. Press TV is Iranian. And of course, the Iranians don't like Trump. So they're going to now sort of turn their news perspective in a bit of a different direction. He created a crisis at the border, Jayapal said. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. The crisis at the border was created by the people who were organizing the caravan and knew that there would be at some point conflict because the numbers were overwhelming. He did not create the crisis, and he was not the first president to use tear gas. The guy before him, number 44, used it quite extensively. The lawmaker's trip will mostly focus on the Mexican side. Yet she would provide Democratic investigators in the judiciary panel with her findings. We're going to dive into all that because this is a central role of the Judiciary Committee to have oversight of these issues, to make sure we're in line with our Constitution. What the fuck does that mean? And our internal human rights obligations. What does internal human rights obligations mean? Like we have some kind of computer inside of ourselves that says that makes us cohere to some quote unquote human right initiative or obligation. What does that mean? We're in violation of that on a number of fronts as far as immigrants grow. There is international and domestic law that governs that process that we are violating. So I put 95% of the blame on this president. I hope this woman has her eyes open to such an extent. I hope that she goes, I don't wish harm on her. I hope she has her eyes open to such an extent and sees things in such a way that it changes her life forever. And forever in a sense that she begins to understand the game that's being played. Will it happen? Likely not. Because she'll be surrounded and insulated by, her handlers and people are to keep her safe. Just insert yourself into the caravan. See what happens. She would never do that. Never. The Trump administration has been under criticism over its zero tolerance immigration policy. Blah, 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 blah. Press TV. Let me check in with you guys in the chat room. See what's going on in there. Libya was an amazing country All the oil cash was used to support the people. Yeah, Libya had a good deal. Absolutely. Gaddafi, yeah, he had a good deal for his people. Where do we start? For instance, if you couldn't have your medical condition taken care of in Libya, you could be flown to any other hospital in any other part of the world and be paid for. Free education at a college level. And again, if you wanted to study abroad, they pay for it. If you were a married couple, you got $50,000 after you got married. Yeah, Libya was not a bad place for Libyans. It wasn't. And of course, most of you know, since you're a really switched on group, that there is a massive aquifer underneath Libya. And Gaddafi had, a master plan to make that region an amazing food and crop producing region. And his idea and plan was to employ a lot of Egyptians so that the Egyptians could reap some of the benefit of this massive aquifer that would really, he had this idea for a Garden of Eden and, creating crops and wealth and abundance. And of course, apparently once he was outed and ousted, they poisoned the waters beneath Libya. That's what I've heard. Let's see. Death and destruction follow the Clintons everywhere. They're a group of approximately 400 males that are known to be criminals. Do you want to know how they got there, who they are? Of course they are. There's it's a mixed bag. Here's what Charles says. She should adopt some children, bring them into her own home. Of course, but they'll never do this. They'll never do this. It's always the bleeding heart at somebody else's expense. Right? The bleeding heart is opened at somebody else's expense. Check out last night's Trump post on Headlines Voice YouTube channel. Let's see what else we have. Homeless problem here is one of the worst in the US. Talk is cheap, actions speak louder than words. Yes, I agree, Lynn. I agree 100%. So we'll see what happens with Miss Jayapal. Apparently, they had a big earthquake in Alaska, and I don't get many people from Alaska in the Exxon chats or in general, but it was apparently it did a huge amount of devastation to a lot of structural damage to Anchorage, and that's pretty significant. Of course, for the people that live there, but it's also significant with the Ring of Fire because usually when that happens, it's a cyclical kind of event. When the Ring of Fire gets triggered, it starts to happen. Earthquakes start to kind of go off around the Ring of Fire, and of course, with Uranus sort of just sitting there hanging out in Aries and getting ready to move back into Taurus at the beginning of the year, I'm sure we'll see a few more seismic activities. What does Justice say? Ace Namal or precede the bastard's cool name. They're not yours. Okay. Yeah. Well, I think, here we are. We're headed down. This Gregorian calendar year is ending. And it's been a pretty intense, interesting, crazy year. The volume, once Trump got into office, even before he got into office, the volume has gotten turned up and it's not going to get turned down anytime soon. So, we're gonna be rolling with this wave of chaos for however long it's going to continue to circle the planet. And in order to do that, of course, it helps to be pliable and flexible and to stay open and be able to, head on a swivel, and to take care of yourself and to take care of your personal life. That's always one of my big maxims, and we're all part of it. It's like we're all working on ourselves. No matter how old we are, we're always working on ourselves. There's a different process in place, and maybe when we're 20 or 30, when we're 50 or 60, but it's all in an effort to refine our relationship with our spirit so that we can continue to have a greater input with the breath of spirit in our lives. And in order to do that, we have to remove certain things at times, look at our patterns, look at our behaviors, and clear things out. We're at that time of year where it begins to really take place. It's a reflective time of year. We're kind of come up on the solstice here very, very quickly. And when that does happen, it's a very powerful, deep, sacred time where there's this, internal turning that takes place. So don't miss out on it. It's also a time of celebration and at times gaiety. With Jupiter and Sagittarius, how could we not celebrate a little bit? And there's an opportunity for us to, really move into another phase, into this new phase, which will come about, of course, in the springtime. So don't be afraid to go within, look at things. Just don't be too hard on yourself either. I think that's another important component to this whole process. Let's see. What do we have here? EQs and heart attacks, etc. It's the thing in the sky. The IPCC tells us. Let's see. Like when HRC visited Myanmar once. Next thing, the country got leveled by a hurricane. I know, right? Exactly. People are waking up, though. Like this gal that I was talking to, this young gal, she knew all about the Clinton Foundation. She knew about Haiti. She was switched on, and she's grew up in Houston, went to a college here, small Catholic school in Austin. She was switched on. She knew what the score was. It was very interesting. People are waking up. That's the one thing that you won't see on the nightly news. That's one thing that the mainstream media won't report. And if it does, it will report it in a pejorative sense. They'll attach some sort of, degrading moniker like conspiracy theorist or whatever. They're really good at that. People are waking up. And that is a fact, Jack. It's happening. The wave of awakening and truth is taking place in our lives, not just on a macro level, but also inside of us as well. This is why it's an important time of year to be able to tune into that. Good time for a reading. Ooh, yes, very good time for a reading. So here's the pitch. I've got some specials over on my website. So I actually offer up roughly about like a 50-page report, which will give you your transits for the coming year. Now, normally that report is $25. So up through the holidays, you get a $10 discount on that. It's very specific. It's not just your sign. It's everything, right? So it's like very, very specific, 50 pages of transit material. If you wanted to get a natal report, if you don't know a lot about astrology or you want to turn somebody on to astrology, again, $10 discount. It's about a 25-page report, which I really recommend. The natal report is great. I also have some specials over on my website. You can purchase packages of 2 readings or 3 readings at a fairly good rate, half-hour readings. And of course, this Saturday, Thinking Astrologically and Beyond, that webinar kicks off. And again, it's a really, really affordable rate, $99, six classes. We got a module of 3 happening. So it's going to be this Saturday, the 8th, and then the 16th, and then the 22nd. And then we're going to break for the holidays. And when we come back, the first class, I believe, is on the 9th, and then 7 days after 16th, and then the 23rd. And if we want to do more, we'll be able to do more as well. This is going to be a lot like some of the stuff that I used to do at Gaia. So we're going to be looking at real high level kind of astrological symbols, what's taking place on a mundane level, and more. Okay. So, I'd love to have you. There's no limit to the class. I think we've got maybe like 20 people signed up right now, and it'll all be through Zoom and Q&A. It'll be good. It'll be good. It'll be very experiential. Let's see. Stars and Stripes, the Gold Fringe, whatever it is. Yes, part of the bar system, British Admiral royalty. Maritime law. When you see the fringe, it's all about maritime law. Okay. Oh yes, BOGO from Chris and Steve bookstore. Yeah, Steve and Chris have a buy one get one free. Hi. By the way, if you haven't read Steve's book, I highly recommend it. It's really good. Really, really good. That's what kickstarted everything with my relationship with Steve and Chris. Steve sent me his book and I read it. I go, man, this guy's a really good writer. Really good writer. He's got some really interesting ideas and factoids. And I said, I want you to be a part of what I'm doing. And then he brought Chris into the equation as well. I'm like totally psyched about that. Talk about BOGO, buy one, get one. They were the original BOGO. Okay. Well, why don't we get on out of here? Oh, here we have we have this our friend here who is now doing some interesting texts. Oh yeah. Should we should get a little decoding moment? Let's just find out what this is. We can do this. Let's do this. Here we go. Let's see. Translate to English. All right. What is this? Hold on. I like games. I like me some games. Something about a marketplace. Something about a marketplace. Hold on a second. Let's do this. All right. Here we go. Let's see what we got here. Hello. What is a market? Hello. What is a market? Here, I will help you. I will help you. It's Russian. It is a Russian. What is a market? Let's do this. Here we go. Market. A market is a place where we do business. There we go. Hold on. See, we provide international services here on 15 Minutes of Flame. Here you go. Just to show you that I'm not xenophobic, right? Just to show you I'm not xenophobic. There you go. That's for you. Logosfood.com, many thanks. Keeps us afloat. There you go. All right. Let's get on out of here. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stay open to what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. Have a great Monday. I'll see you tomorrow.